Welcome to the Continuous Transformation Podcast, where spirit and science meet and creatively merge to give birth to the future. Disclaimer: high risk of life-transforming perspectives.
This is the best time to begin your continuous transformation process.
Your host is Advaitananda, a visionary, influencer, and scientist with a quantum physics background and more than 30 years' experience of yoga, tantra, and meditation practice and teaching. Episode 12, Demystifying Tantra, A Path of Spiritual Science. Inquiries by Foca Yariv. Out of misunderstandings and ignorance, Tantra often appears to be a path of spiritualized sex, or a hope of salvation from humanity's perilous decadence. But what is Tantra, and why is it so often misunderstood? Having walked this path for 30 years, in this talk Advaitananda answers these questions from Tantra teacher Foca Yariv, where they aim to debunk some myths and inspire you to try this path for yourself.
What makes Tantra so accessible for society nowadays?
Practically, Tantra is the spirit of science of evolution. Tantra has this dimension of logic and rationality impeccable. It traverses from the lowest instincts through rationality and logic to the highest intuition. Everything I took from books of Tantra, all kinds of statements, principles, methods, and systematically in similar conditions obtain similar results.
In which bookshelf would you put books about Tantra?
I would make a bookshelf which is called the core of every science. Tantra is to make this path of life itself significant, going to the destination. That's all. And you can accelerate your transformation and evolution once you learn how to drive. Desires are a map. A map to what? To your fundamental needs. What are the fundamental needs indicating? What do you need to reach to the destination? Hi, I'm Advaitananda, and this is the Continuous Transformation Podcast. We hear more and more today, especially in circles of New Ageism, about Tantra, and sometimes even about Neo-Tantra, a kind of new form of Tantra. Some people present Tantra as the solution to all modern problems that we face in the modern world. Others see Tantra as the embodiment of deprivation and decadence, a kind of license to uncontrolled lust and fornication, containing orgiastic rites and strange magical ceremonies. Many people in India consider Tantra as the most powerful dark magic, employing the forbidden forces of nature, such as sex. Other people in the same country talk with deepest reverence about the mysterious and very often hidden Tantric masters that secretly help humanity evolve. Of course, for such dubious fame, Tantra enjoy an unusual attention from the scholars as well, and often it becomes the center of academic controversies. About Tantra, there are written lots of very voluminous studies and books, and there are, time and again, media scandals around different practices and practitioners of Tantra. However, no matter what one or another would say about Tantra, one thing is sure. This system is meant to catch the public eye. This system is constantly attracting the attention, and there are very, very solid reasons for this. My personal experience with the Tantric system started many years ago. It started in the aftermath of the 1989 Romanian Revolution, when in those very turbulent times I met an extraordinary man that managed to trigger my curiosity, not only about Tantra. Actually, I heard about the word a little later, but it triggered curiosity about what we can do more in our life, our boundaries, how can we push these limits further and further in our life. I was already fascinated by the possibility for pushing the boundaries of this life, and I was fascinated by mysteries of existence, if you want, and these teachings were, of course, interestingly combined with my upbringing, because I grew up in an atheistic system, the communist system, which was officially an atheistic system, and I grew up in a family of science. So, of course, that kind of aggravated a little bit the things, but interestingly, I was searching for more. And this man, by his name Grigorian Bivolaru, Grig, as I used to call him for many years already, was not in the academia, and to my upbringing that was minus at the time. But despite the fact that he was not in the academia, he was not a person of formal training, everything he told me made perfect sense, and even make perfect sense from my academic perspective. I learned from him methods that were amazingly efficient. I learned from him techniques that later on proved to increase my capacities in a measurable, quantifiable way, even beyond the known limits. But what was for me at the time extraordinary, and that represented in fact the first touch with the Tantric system, was the fact that this methodology that he was presenting to me was extremely precise. And actually, it was presented in a scientific manner. It has a scientific structure beneath it and scientific clarity, I would call it. And of course, this proper explanation of all and everything that was practiced, all the effects, and the freedom that I was given to validate by my own practice all the results, that kind of seduced my soul. Of course, it took me a while until I could validate through practice everything I heard Greg saying, because many of his statements, I have to say, at the time looked a little bit more science fiction than science facts. But through practice, I could validate, and as I said, this very systematic way of presenting and way of exploring the results was nothing less than the spirit of science in which I grew up in my family. So practically, I realized that what I was in touch with was a genuine spiritual science. Later on, I learned that this is, in fact, the Tantric system. The Tantric system, in its most profound spirit, is a spiritual science. My teacher was revealing, therefore, for me, in those years, very turbulent years for our society at the time, the most systematic, comprehensive, and efficient way of understanding and transforming oneself. After a while of practicing, I started to teach. I started to share with others all these wonders. And together with my wife and tantric lover, Adina, which some of you have met in some previous podcasts, and under the attentive guidance of our teacher, Greg, we started to write what today is known as the Esoteric Integral Tantra course, a course that now is the widest and most complex system of learning Tantra in our modern time. It is taught in over 30 countries worldwide by hundreds of highly specialized teachers. It's enough to mention here that each teacher undergo a minimum of 7 years of personal guided training and learning the foundation of this genuine science of life, which is Tantra. And the last 4 years of this period is an intense teacher's training summing more than 1,200 hours of in-depth study, practice, and examinations, which are in this way crowning their efforts to bring this amazing, genuine spiritual science into the world, which is Tantra. On the other hand, we see today Tantra is often misunderstood or mistaken for what people project on it. Practically everybody speaks about Tantra for what they hope Tantra to be. Tantra is therefore a very open system of self-knowledge and self-transformation upon which everybody dump their wishful thinking, their hopes, and so on. To get closer to this system, from my experience, one needs to leave behind any preconceived idea or prejudice. Tantra is a very bold system of going beyond any preconceived idea and know yourself for what you truly are. Absence of this condition to be extremely open, the challenge to the ego is great when meeting the tantric system for what it is. The inner reaction very often makes people to run away, saying that the system is wrong, or sometimes even attacking the other practitioners, because of course, why not? We need to whitewash our past by dirtying the others in it. I've seen this also in me when I met Grieg, my teacher, and I've seen it in many other practitioners. It's a very big temptation when facing such a system of, I would say, a radical transformation. Being therefore a highly efficient system of personal transformation, the tantric system is perceived by those who do not really mean transformation, they are just a little bit curious, as a tough system. Because once you meet this system, you have a very hard time to go back to the sleep of ignorance. Of course, being still very intriguing, the tantric system attracted attention throughout ages. And many tried today to adapt it to this snowflakes culture that we have today, and therefore they try to dim down its radiant light for the curious and rather superficial seekers that we have today. And the result is, unfortunately, quite hideous. The result is what I call a spiritual Frankenstein, a meaningless but rather spectacular mix of sexual perversions that is sold with incense sticks and tea candles. This is also the reason why I wanted to open a series of talks about the tantric system, because I also am one of the people who consider this system as extraordinarily useful for the world today when it is shared responsibly, when it is explained properly, and when it is practiced with great attention. I want to share first-hand experiences and perspectives, also debunking in the process some of the myths about Tantra, and most importantly, inspiring some of the listeners to check it out, to see what it is. Today I invited to shoot the questions on a topic that means a lot to him, a dear friend of mine, a Tantra practitioner for more than 20 years and a teacher for more than 10 years. I invited Foca Yariv from United Kingdom. Welcome, Foca.
Hi, Ava. Pleasure to be here and a very insightful introduction. I look forward for the topic to understand a bit more these mysteries.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know Foca lives and teaches in London and Cambridge, several classes. Foca, you're teaching 7 classes per week?
Some evenings too.
Some evenings too, yeah. He is also teaching camps, retreats, workshops on the topic of Tantra and connected topics. He is one of the first graduates of the International Tantra Teacher Training course, and he's an inspiring force for his students and also what I consider an ardent student himself. Part-time, Foca is working in real estate in London. Perhaps because I missed your questions, Foca, in the class, I wanted you here today to ask your questions about this common favorite subject for both of us, which is Tantra.
Yeah, we had 7 years. Ava was my teacher, and I used to come with all these questions. I used to gather in between meeting a whole group of questions, and usually we had the audience of the other teachers, aspirants, looking at the debate. And I'm very happy to be part of this podcast, which aims to clarify some of those questions that I see more and more also in our students here. One of the big questions is why still some of our students are ashamed to say that they are going to a Tantra class. Some of them, I had one student for 10 years, he said, I'm going to a yoga class, because he was ashamed to say Tantra. And then, I remember 7 years ago, we launched here a Tantra festival in the UK with a group of us, and we went in the street and we interviewed people and asked them, what do you think Tantra is? And half of them blushed, a quarter of them said sex, and another quarter said something Indian, maybe a dance. And I was... That is what people think Tantra is. Now, I know this maybe it's true, maybe not, but in the last years there is more and more talk about it, and a lot of it also came with the Osho movie that came on Netflix, the famous Wild Wild Country. And my question is a very simple one. How come Tantra as a system, which is so elaborate, as you mentioned, as science, became so wrongly misunderstood that people need to be ashamed to say that they do Tantra? People are afraid to say it because the others will think that they do something very strange, as you said, black magic or who knows what, an orgy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your question actually reflects some reality about how we have a problem to reflect today upon a truth that is a little more complex. In a culture that tried to simplify everything, to even have shortcut words for almost everything, of course, there are systems, there are parts of our life which simply will lose a lot when you simplify it. Imagine that you try to simplify a chemical formula.
Different.
Yeah, exactly. So, but today we do that in our current language. We shortcut things. But if you are a chemist and you shortcut a complex formula because come on, I can't say desoxyribonucleic acid. Call it something, But that one, if you cut a little bit of the ribo, oxy, nucleic something, it's something else entirely. You talk about something else. And this is the danger of, instead of taking things for what they are, trying to take shortcuts. I call it the temptation of the shortcut. The temptation of the shortcut always appears when we don't understand that the trip, the road, is contained in the destination. So therefore, we say, it doesn't matter how I arrive at the destination, and therefore, I can even take a shortcut. But we don't understand that the destination requires from us a certain qualification that is gained on that long, rather difficult path that is ahead of us. Taking a shortcut, very often we take a shortcut in getting ready to belong to the destination. And there is nothing more, let's say, clearly reflected into this example than any spiritual system or any spiritual science, or any science for that matter. You can't simplify it, but we do try. And then, of course, also because we don't take spirituality as serious today. It's part of almost like in the chapter entertainment. It's like between entertainment and a little bit of development in free time. It's not like main mainstream of our life. It's free time, entertainment, a little bit of development. And because that's the section where it is, of course it can be subjected to shortcuts. Meaning, we try to simplify it a lot and it loses its meaning. It loses its, even in the basic understanding. And that's where myths are born, and that's where people start to consider it for what it is not. It's vulgarization. Vulgarization is to bring it down to the vulgus, to the people. By the way, search the dictionary. Some people say, "Oh, he speaks he speaks dirty here." It's a totally normal thing. So, speaking of today's lack of culture, not in the sense of in a sense of a certain complex set of conventions. I'm talking about here education, profound understanding of life itself. So that's the reason. There are a lot of myths about Tantra because Tantra is such a complex object, so to speak, and everybody describes a piece of it. Like in the example with the 5 blind men traveling through an Indian forest and talking about what is an elephant, what is Tantra. And then they meet an elephant, and then because they were blind, they were just touching the elephant, and each of them afterwards, when the elephant left, they started to say, now I know, an elephant is like the temple, the column of a temple, because he touched the leg, one of the legs of the other one who touched the tail says, no, it's like a broomstick, a little bit with a fluffy thing in the end. That's the elephant. What are you talking about? Where did you see? Another one who touched the trunk says, no, it's like a boa snake, which is having a life of itself, and so on. So, a friend of mine completed in a kind of naughty way, and the one who touches the butt, he said, is nothing, the elephant, because he was just the the void. Anyway, the point is, very often people are projecting on a complex object, such as a tantric system, which is the system of understanding life itself. They cut a slice of it, and then they say, oh, Tantra is this. And, of course, like when you cut a slice in a cake, you always want the slice with the cherry, or the slice with the, if it's possible, you cut it like this, you take the piece with the cherry, which is in Tantra, what? For instance, intimacy. Tantra speaks about intimacy. Everybody cuts that slice. Would you like the other? No, thank I'm good. But I want this one because it has the cherry and the biscuit or something there. And that's the reason why, this tendency of simplification plus this little education we get ourselves into, then the combination could raise monsters. I had the experience in India when I went there with Adina, and kind of the rumors spread around from some of our students. They are a tantric couple. We didn't know how infamous is Tantra in India in some circles. Anyway, rumors spread, they are a tantric couple. And then I noticed, I went to the opening of a university, imagine, and I was invited as a speaker there at the opening. So I was talking in that environment, and when I was turning to shake hands with people were backing off as if I electrocuted them or something. So in the beginning, I thought it's a matter of respect. I thought, oh, wow, that's a little bit too much. They don't touch me, But then I noticed, really they were trying desperately not to be touched in any way. So I inquired, is there a problem here, or what is that? You don't touch foreigners, or it's a religious thing? I didn't expect that in an academic environment. And they were saying, yeah, people think that if you are touched by a tantric master, you get bewitched. Oh, yeah. It's like, I wouldn't expect that at all. It's like, how did you come up with that thing? Yeah. So that's why it's all it covers all the spectrum of possible misunderstandings, from human sacrifices and all kind of weird, orgiastic cults to the most deprivation and strange magic controlling people's consciousness and so on. And that is because the tantric system is cut into slices by adventurers, as I call them, of spirituality, who try to, sell it exactly as these people who steal from monuments or something, some things they don't understand, a tablet with writings, and they cut pieces of it and they sell it to a museum, to another museum, and then the poor researchers are looking there and says, wow, this is such a mysterious artifact, but we don't understand anything. It's just because somebody cut it and spread it around the world, and if you put it back together, it makes perfect sense. You understand it in a glance.
So you would say that the neo-tantrism is kind of started in the 80s with Osho and now progressed quite a bit. I mean, there are big events and there are quite a few people who are interested in that. They cut that slice of the cake because also sex sells and it became a very big thing, which led to a lot of misunderstanding of that. And then you said that the difference is in the tantric system as you present it, as you practice it, it is the whole cake. Now, as a question, how can we inspire those who are in the neo-tantric to tell them, hey, you just have a cake, you just have a slice. What is the benefits of having the whole cake? Because you say, I have a slice, but I really like the cherry here, it's a fantastic cherry. What will be the advantage of having the entire cake now?
Yeah, you see, how you can tell these people is the following. If you eat only the slice with a cherry, you can eat just as many until you get ill. But if you will pay attention, on each slice of the cake, there is something that helps you to maintain a perfect balance so you can eat the whole cake and feel great instead of getting fat. So if you eat only that slice, you just get fat very soon and diabetic or whatever other problems. While if you eat the whole cake, you get enlightened, as let's put it like that, idealistically, yeah. And this idea that they picked up one thing only or one thing that sells. It's also a tendency that we have today to consider that we can do whatever we want in terms of laws of consciousness. Laws of nature, we started to learn that we can't do everything we want. So, for instance, we don't mess with gravity because since we were children, anytime we tried to fly, the gravity was implacable.
Superman is one.
Yeah.
We cannot defeat
Don't try. Even though I'm sure each of us tried a little bit secretly with a blanket on our back. I mean, who didn't? But still, yeah, and the under, that's the sign of Superman. And so we all tried that, and we had the direct experience, which is an important element there. Direct experience, you don't mess up with the laws of nature. But it seems like the laws of inner nature, we still can mess up with them a lot today. And actually, they are as precise as the laws of outer nature. And the fact that we ignore them doesn't make them less precise or less present. And actually, this is what Tantra is. It's a science of life that is teaching the universal principles and laws with applications that shows you how to check, how to validate, and even how to push forward this usage of the laws. So that's the whole cake, you know. And when they choose, for instance, when you choose the one with the cherry, the one with the sex, for instance, apart from the fact that it's a myth, this one with sex in Tantra, because Tantra is explaining that sex is an animalic instinct. Actually, the point of view of Tantra regarding sex coincide with the point of view of Christianity, of Islam, and any other traditions on the planet which are critical about it. The Tantric system is exactly in the same position about sex. However, they say that intimacy is an enormous force that can be used and harvested for our evolution, but intimacy practiced in a completely different context that the Tantrics call it eros, not sex, and therefore you discover a totally different type of intimacy. And that's one of the things that is different. You see, I am specialized in university, I specialized in nuclear technology. Well, in the history of nuclear technology on the planet, humanity discovered nuclear power. But the first thing we built, the first functional device we built with that power was the bomb. Not a nuclear power plant. That came later, after we successfully detonated a few bombs. And yeah, we know what happened there. Totally without reason, totally abusive and so on. Then we make the first functional nuclear reactor to produce energy. Yeah, it's the same. We have forces inside and the creative potential which manifest explosively like a nuclear bomb. Sex is the equivalent of a nuclear bomb. But the force behind sex is analogically like the nuclear power. Yeah? And imagine that somebody comes to you and says, if you'll stop building bombs, I can show you how to make nuclear reactors. And then you will ask, will it be the same? Well, it will be the same power, but you can empower the entire city with it. Otherwise, you destroy the entire city with it. So you either create Sodom and Gomorrah by destroying it, or you can illuminate Sodom and Gomorrah and live happily ever after with the same power that instead of destroying everyone morally, mentally, or whatever, you can use that for your evolution. That, I would say, is a good argument, appealing. Yeah. So that's the neo-tantrics today. They are kind of people who discover nuclear power and they have fun bombing different neighbors. Hey, wow, that was fantastic. Like we did in the 50s in the Pacific. Didn't we destroy a lot of local tribes and societies there, pulverizing their islands, the atolls there all over the place? They did hundreds of experiments until some people came to their senses and say, oh, listen, that's not exactly good to play with. What if we build a nuclear reactor? We keep it inside, we put some pipes on it, we create energy, lots of energy with the same power that is just in a fraction of a second, no doubt. It makes some sparks there, and people have a lot of fun watching. Whoa, that was amazing. But it's kind of infantile. Yeah. So I'm bringing this example with the nuclear also because I know it, because I was educated in it, but also because it's exactly why is Tantra so tempting? Because it's giving access not to fireworks, no, to nuclear power. So you can make a fire stronger than billions of fireworks in the same time. And this is unlocked by the different tantric techniques from within. And this is like the El Dorado. Actually, some of the more serious, like the modern magicians, Aleister Crowley and so on, they were serious. They didn't look for crackers and they look for the real nuke. For the real nuke there, they wanted so much, but of course they tried shortcuts, and every time they tried, they blew it, so to speak. And of course, the society blamed them. Look, it's not healthy, it's not good what you're doing, and rightfully so, because it is indeed even dangerous. It's destroying people morally when, for instance, you enhance only cherry slice of it, only the sex part of life, and you become obsessed because you are not endowed with the capacity to dominate such a strong instinct, such a strong power inside of you, also without techniques. So
we can say that the neo-tantrics take only that slice, and only when we have the cake that slice could actually make sense. And then instead of this atomic explosions, we will have the power plants that will fuel all those highest aspirations.
But the slice, listen, the slice is if you take the uranium in the reactor, is the bomb. If you put all the pipes around, is the reactor.
Okay, it's the context that kind of makes it so that it is becoming applicable, useful, and we can harness its power. Now, taking a little bit back your example of your trip in India and the fact that the Indians were afraid of you. I mean, they were afraid of you because for decades, centuries, the Tantrics were on the outcast, the famous agoris. They were sitting there in the piers where you would burn the corpse there on the ghats, and they were having a lot of reputation, long hair usually, not conventional, a lot of, you can say, a very new way of relating to life. I mean, this antinomianism, I believe it's called, the one like in Christianity that against the common moral conduct. And then on the other hand, you'll have also some tantrics who also brought, for example, Tantra to Tibet, and it became, Tantric Buddhism, and everybody knows about it now, even if they don't call themselves Tantrics, it is started from Tantra. And questions here, those two, how they are linked, because then came the debate, one is the left hand of Tantra, the one that made them all jump back when they saw you, and the right hand of Tantra, which is now very accepted. What is actually the difference between the left and right hand, and what is, you will say, you as a practitioner, what is your inclination, or it is a merging of the two in one way or another?
Well, I would give you the famous example with you clap your hands, and then somebody tells you, just listen to the left hand now, or listen to the right hand. That's the whole essence of splitting Tantra in left and right, basically, because they are two angles on the same phenomena, and the split mostly appeared when we started to, we started to misunderstand, and periodically humanity goes through this kind of contraction of its consciousness, of its understanding. People start to lose appetite for education. They inherited good conditions usually, and the next generation after good conditions is more degenerate from a perspective of morality, intelligence, and so on, and therefore they kind of lose perspective and they try shortcuts. And every time they try shortcuts, the most radical ones, the most radical shortcuts are blamed by the rest of the society, because yes, imagine that you are up in the mountains, there are millions of people trying to cross the mountains, and somebody discover a shortcut, perhaps it's even working, but it's a very narrow path, and then naively you say, everybody follow me, and of course a lot of enthusiasm starts, hundreds of people start to fall in the abyss, and the rest of the people ban that thing completely, like you will be thrown away from the rest of the tribe, from the rest of the people, if you even dare to speak about it, because look what tragedy happened last time when we tried that shortcut. But after all, it was just because you tried the wrong shortcut. You tried a shortcut. Tantra is not about a shortcut. Tantra is to make this path of life itself significant, going to the destination. That's all. And you can accelerate your transformation and evolution once you learn how to drive. Then you can accelerate and decelerate or go around obstacles and so on. You can become a master driver. And exactly as in driving, you have an acceleration and you have a brake system. And the same with the left hand and right hand, And all these, let's say, complementary parts on Tantra, they are then viewed on left and right. There is indeed a tendency of making the life here and now more significant, more spiritually potent for you, such as, for instance, harvest every desire, but not every desire as in stimulate idiotic desires and harvest that. Not even near. On the contrary, In the same time, you alchemize desires and you alchemize inner tendencies, transform them into aspirations. And meanwhile, that gigantic force is harvested and employed for your transformation and evolution. But because you are starting from daily experiences, some people have, let's say, a better chance for that, if you want, even though chance is not exactly the word, but have a better position. Why? Because they're very much entangled with life experiences. And for them, it's exactly like you teach a fish to get out of the net instead of cutting the net or destroying the net. You just teach how to get out of the labyrinth. And it's very valuable for them, because not all of them have the tools to cut the fishing net and release themselves, analogically. But of course, there are people who say, I'm not even interested. They're born with a certain state of detachment of life itself. They're really above somehow. And of course, what do you do with those people? They hardly touch the ground with their feet, so to speak. You first tell them, stay on the ground, touch the objects around you, feel the desire calling you from the ice cream, and then transcend the desire for the ice cream. Many people will say, I don't have the desire for the ice cream. What am I doing here? And then, of course, for these people, you just say, continue from there. That's the right hand. So going through life experiences or going beyond life experiences. Now, there are the shadows of it. The shadow is when the left-hand Tantra is trying shortcuts, people say, I do the Tantra for the sake of sex, which is completely wrong. Yeah. The others are saying, I hate the world. My whole energy, instead of being I am going beyond the world with my life experiences. No, I'm just here to hate the world, to deny its existence, even to mock everyone who live in the world. And both of them are excessive. Both of them, in the history of Tantra, if you look back, they were becoming small sects or small enclaves that were ostracized by society because they were abusive, they were extremes. Both of them. In history, they are mostly known the so-called left hand because they were the ones with more concrete examples, so to speak. They were caught doing orgies, and then everybody freaked out. But also the others, for instance, they were the ones generating radicalism in a very sometimes dangerous way. As I said, why do you hate the world? You claim you believe in a creator of the world, you praise the creator, but you hate his creation. What was that about? How is that even intelligent or coherent?
So you can say, just trying to understand it. So you can say that like the left and right hand are two parts of a circle, and they complete one another. You can take the circle like this or like that, but it is the same circle, and it's just the way you describe the path, and the two are interwoven in a mysterious way.
Also, yes, and also it depends, if you take the good example with the circle that you gave, we're not starting all from the mergence of the two circles. Some people are already 30 degrees in the left semicircle. Now, you can take 30 degrees back to the position of balance and go back 180 degrees to the destination, or just go the 150 degrees which are left to reach to the destination. So, and of course, people prefer the one which is at least shorter, maybe not the shortcut, cutting the circle out, but at least the shorter one. You are inclined, for instance, for a person who have intense experiences through the senses, who love life. Well, Tantra on the left hand, so to speak, which again is just an arbitrary, the part of Tantra which teaches you the meaning of all your experiences, desires. Very few people know, for instance, that every desire we have, it's a hidden necessity, a hidden fundamental need disguised as a desire. Yeah. When you start to understand that and you start to know what kind of need a desire signal, You're not fighting like Don Quixote with the windmills against your desires. No, desires are a map. A map to what? To your fundamental needs. What are the fundamental needs indicating? What do you need to reach to the destination? But that's wise, that's good. And then suddenly, from a person with hedonistic tendencies, who's always crushed by the desires, by sensorial and sensual experiences, that person employ all these forces in an uplifting stream. Now, that is a very good, useful... If you go to such a person and say, please don't touch anything. It's like the experiment with the kid forbidding, the marshmallow...
Well, the marshmallow experiment.
It's exactly that. It's like textbook marshmallow experiment for many people today. And therefore, it's almost meaningless to tell them, stay away. But there are still people who are like that. You tell them, don't touch the marshmallow. I was not even thinking about it. So tell me something more about not touching the marshmallow. Okay, because beyond that, there is a lot. So that's why there are, in the ancient time, this split was only made by people's choice. Tantra was a solid block, if you want, undivided, a solid block of science of life, and then according to their inclinations, people will explore it, and they created kind of statistically, if you want, two groups of people. And when suddenly these people lost perspective, they turn it into some weird practices, and that's what we see blamed again and again by different societies in time, not the real tantric practitioners.
Yeah, that clarifies a lot about this misconception in Tantra. Now, taking on this line of thought that you said, in the Mahanirvana Tantra, one of the famous texts translated by Arthur Avalon in the beginning of the last century, it's mentioned there that in this era, as I mentioned there, the Kali Yuga, this time of darkness that they describe, Tantra is the best practice, or Tantra is the spiritual path that is most accessible. Now, what makes Tantra so accessible for society nowadays, in general, in this era, and even more specifically in pandemic, however you want to call it, it is even more fitting? What makes it so that it is such a perfect fit between doctrine and our modern time, and specifically the time we live now?
That's a very daring question, I have to say. It is true that there are a lot of, let's say, I hesitate to call them prophecies, but anticipations about the future in ancient texts. As we know, ancients had this hobby to peek into the future, as they also wanted to peek and learn from the past. Today we tend to cancel the past. Probably we cancel the future together with that, but that's another observation. But in the ancient time, of course, they peeked into the past as well as into the future, and they left us with a lot of predictions like it will come a dark age when people will start to forget who they are. And it's very interesting, and that's why I want to bring up this Mahanirvana Tantra prediction, anticipation. One of the characteristics described there, as well as in numberless predictions in Tibetan texts, in Jewish texts, in Christian texts, is this Mayan text and so on. These times always are characterized by the rise of the rational spirit, the rationality, which is excluding very much the intuitive part of the consciousness. People are more seduced by what? Logic explanations, logic as such, causality. Everything has to be a cause and effect, direct causality, linearity. Practically, if you read those texts, it's a description of what? Of how science defines itself today.
Science is the new God.
Science is the new, maybe not the new God, but the new religion, for sure. And but interestingly, as we know, in process of therapy, in process of helping someone, the best to help a person is first to tune in with that person. You cannot go in trying to help a person by pulling in a sudden direction, completely unexpected, and so they will not understand anything. You can't help a person. And then it comes the reason why Tantra becomes and recommended to be a solution. Because Tantra is the very spirit of science. Tantra is the spirit of science itself. In Tantra, I never heard my teacher telling me, believe in that. No, he even explained me the meaning of belief and its importance and its percentage, if you want importance, in the spiritual evolution. Belief has a certain role in the spiritual evolution as well as other forces. So practically, Tantra is the spirit of science of evolution. And of course, when people start to become almost obsessed with this scientific spirit, the only way to approach them is in the spirit of science. You cannot tell to a person today, I mean, this is me. I grew up in a family of scientists. My father is a mathematician, the essence of science. And you cannot tell me, the teenager that I was at the time when I met Grieg, you cannot tell me, believe me. But Grieg never told me, believe me. Grieg said, this is the mechanism, this is the principle. Does it make sense for you? Oh, perfect. It's exactly the second principle of thermodynamics, generalized. It makes sense. And he said, that method can validate it inside of you. Try it. Try it. Don't believe me. Try it. I tried it, and systematically there was the same result. What does a scientific experiment tell? In similar conditions, you obtain similar results. That's a successful experiment. This is what I did thousands of times with everything I was told. I took from books of Tantra, all kinds of statements, principles, methods, and systematically in similar conditions obtain similar results, and even increasing the results to performance that were beyond even the medical explanation sometimes, yet I have a perfectly sound explanation because I followed it step by step. So that's why it makes it the perfect, let's say, solution, because when you get trapped into this logic, into this rationality, suddenly Tantra has this dimension of logic and rationality impeccable. There is no disruption there. It traverses from the lowest instincts through rationality and logic to the highest intuition, everything. And once we're trapped in the middle there, trying to explain everything, trying to find experiments which validate, otherwise if I can't touch it with my own senses, I don't believe it, Tantra gives you access to that. But that, of course, then suddenly it becomes a solution, because that is how you can approach everyone today. I've never met a person, of course, a reasonable person I'm talking, like not somebody who has some preconceived ideas so solid that you cannot open a dialogue, but a reasonable person who was not, after a few minutes, giving in, saying, it makes sense, I can't say anything against it, good, try. And that's it. That's the only... And this is not the first time. There were other ages in human history where sometimes locally people got entangled with this kind of spirit of rationality, of causality, linearity in everything, even in the social life and so on. And then a tantric master appeared and took them from there. And took them with exactly what, for instance, their local religion couldn't offer. See, for instance, today religion is falling immensely, because it is falling down and it's losing the battle, because they can't even explain basic things from their own things. Tell us, why do you forbid us to have intimate relations? Because God said so. But God created the intimate relations. every intelligent young man and woman today, they will say, but God created the intimate relations. How come God created it and says, don't you ever touch that? Only me, I'm allowed to. Or what? Like, this is looking a little bit like a communist leader than a God. And or modern leaders, for that sake, unfortunately, who are always above the law they created. So that's the interesting part with this. So that's why it is indeed bringing lots of solutions, not only because it's full of solutions and full of amazing revelations, but also it delivers it in the most easy to understand for today's spirit, which is characteristic for a time when we get trapped in our own logics, so to speak, and systems of beliefs and so on.
So exactly in this era when the logic is so strong, Tantra provides a logical system that could take all those with very sharp minds to a place which is beyond that.
Exactly. I mean, I've seen my father, mathematician. I learned mathematics from him, and he's a brilliant mathematician. I've seen him falling for it, and I grew up we were not allowed to say. I mean, not allowed. He is an intelligent person, but as children, if me or my brother will come with, well, I don't know, it is like that, he would come to us and say, no, you can't say that. You need to search for a logical explanation. Everything must have an explanation. Look careful, look careful, look careful. He was pushing the little kids there to do these kind of things. Imagine, I grew up like that. And I came back to him with a stronger logic, the Tantric logic, which is impeccable from that perspective.
The checkmate for the...
Exactly, the checkmate to the master, that was the thing, So it's a system that doesn't tell you anything but principles, laws, and as a scientist, by the way, studying ancient Tantric texts and having studied science, many domains of science, it's absolutely shocking because it's practically the same things. Just the terminology is slightly different, but the principles and laws they revealed thousands of years ago are the principles and laws that we today put in science there, and we claim, wow, this is a huge discovery.
Same universe we speak about.
Of course, the object of study is the same.
I have a question for you. Behind you there's all those bookshelves. In which bookshelf will you put books about Tantra? In a bookshelf called World Religions, in a bookshelf called Science, as you mentioned, in a bookshelf called Belief, in a bookshelf called Inspiration, Spirituality. How would you categorize? Where will you put Tantra? In which one is it fitting the most? What would be your best definition of Tantra?
I would make a bookshelf, a new one, in the middle of the library there, which is behind me, so you can't see it. You see, it's a little empty there, like that. I would make it a bookshelf, which is called the core, or the core of every science, the spirit of science. Tantra is, for me, the spirit of science, which is combining intuition, it's combining logic in its most evolved form, it's combining complexity and yet simplicity in that complexity, is calling for wisdom as well as for understanding, is triggering the most profound intuitions, artistic intuitions. For instance, in Tantra, many texts are written as poems. But it is known, for instance, mathematicians, this I learned from my father. My father used to say, as long as you didn't understand the poetry of mathematics, you're not yet there. You didn't understand mathematics. In the beginning, we were all laughing on him, like, okay, I think you too many formulas, do some chemistry there, that you are a little cuckoo. But in time, I came to agree with him also. I started to realize, no, he's right. Well, Tantra is the poetry of mathematics, is the precision of chemistry. Tantra is the chemistry of the heart. Tantra is exactly all those links that we need desperately today between all the shelves in the library. Because one of the problems of this library behind me is the shelves, not the books. The separation between books. The fact that we have a book in a shelf there that is contradicting a book in that shelf, and we can't see that because we never make the connection. You see, we built, using science, devices that kills human beings, and we can't see the contradiction. We can't see the irony on that. Science that is born to serve the human life is used to destroy it, and we can't see the irony of it. And this is just a classic example, but there are so many like this. So what I'm saying, the problem of that library behind me is the shelves. And then, of course, this is a dilemma, age-old dilemma. How can we dissolve the shelves yet have access to the knowledge? Then we have a science of reading between the lines, reading interconnectivity. And interestingly, the word Tantra is networking or net or interconnectivity. Interestingly, again, synchronistically, this is the age of interconnections, internet, interconnectivity, networking par excellence. Who is the science of networking par excellence? The universal networking, the holographic structure of the universe, which consists in everything connected, interconnected with everything. Tantra. So, yeah.
Maybe we call it the unifying factor, the one that's in the middle and everything is interlinked and it's kind of
But what we look in science today, we look for a unifying theory. The unifying theory in science is just that one behind me. It's the Tantric shelf. The Tantric iconography, for instance, seem to, and I've spoken with scholars, they used to have this impression, it's a little messy in Tantra, because it's a compendium of many opinions. Everybody who had an opinion, they were strongly stating it, writing their own books, their own, not necessarily books, pergaments or whatever was the medium of transmission at that time, palm leaves, all kind of. They wrote it down, and therefore practically it's a kind of a mess because everybody's vision is added to everybody's vision. But I strongly disagree with that. It's perfect coherence. It's just that the elephant is so big, the universal elephant is so big that simply it's very hard to touch it all at the same time unless you are in a very altered state of consciousness. And for this reason, when you extract one slice of it or one slice, another slice, you see different truths. But actually, the whole body of Tantric teachings has a perfect description of everything. So, yeah, it is the unifying, literally the unifying theory in itself.
So then instead of being contradictory force, everything take a coherence, which both manifest in the world of science and in the world of individual, because those bookshelves we also have inside of us. We have those bookshelves that we read and other bookshelves that we and like those two books, those two ideas, they clash between, and then the Tantric system will bring it into a coherent whole, you say.
Not only that it brings peace, which I think is one of the most important applications, a reason for which, in times of decadence, what is one of the common ground of everything? War. And then it comes a unifying factor, which bring peace, which bring peace inside, first of all, because it's unifying these factions of our consciousness. Put us at peace with, for instance, our lower instincts, instead of fighting and hating them and hating everything that reminds us, even the people that reminds us about these instincts that we actually have inside. We don't hate those instincts anymore. We integrate them harmoniously into a superior existence. And then suddenly I have no quarrel with the people who represent those instincts. And another conflict solved into the world. So yes, it is a pacifying factor exactly in times of the maximum trouble.
Yes. As the last question, I don't know if we have time.
Yeah, let's put it. Yeah.
As Dennis described, okay, that's the most important thing. That's the medicine for this decadence time. How you as a visionary, as a I would say even more than a visionary, a very hopeful person. How do you see the Tantric teachings propagate? How do you believe that this will come to something which is not left only for a few hundreds here and there, but something that can become a mainstream? So I will take the question into how do you see it happening, and how do you see a society in which the Tantric principles and ideals look like? How will it appear?
It will appear by necessity, you know. I don't see this system as propagated activistically, you know. I don't see an activist in Tantra. I see it rather as a result of an immense necessity. And the pillars are already there. Science. Tantra is the most suitable host for the scientific shell. So practically what science built today was the external shell of the human consciousness, in which the inhabitant will need an internal structure. That will be the next level, the Tantric teachings, which will structure the human consciousness, which will be hosted in the exterior shell of science. It's a symbolic way to put it. We will not be snails, in my opinion, but we sometimes seem that we borrow from the snail the speed of evolution, but let's not rush. I see it as what happens today in the world creates bigger and bigger necessity for the tantric system to be absorbed. I see it rather an absorption of the tantric system throughout the entire human society, to entire world, rather than being pushed in, projected into, inserted into. No, I see it rather than being absorbed in. And this is my subjective experience. And your subjective experience as well, I'm sure. You see how the Tantra courses, as you know me joking, very often we try to stop people attending by not knowing how to advertise it and so on. And basically, our students are the meritorious people who succeed to pass our advertising. That is sometimes not very bright. And but still, the classes are growing everywhere. The new Tantra courses are opening everywhere. And this, I see it as the result of the forces of necessity, because this system in its core is necessary, and necessity as the biggest force in the universe. Once necessity is there, the manifestation of what is necessary is inevitable. As we know, the function creates the organ. And now the function is shaped, the need in the world is there. We have the scientific spirit, is already obsessing us, is already blocking our creativity. The science itself is in a collapse, in a kind of a rapid degenerative process. It needs a lot of self-inquiry, so to speak, to find its path again. And that is where the Tantric system is coming to graft this perspective, this superior perspective. So I see it as a necessity. It will not be propagated in a human society as a must, when tantric activists everywhere showing to the world, we need to learn these things about ourselves. No, I see people will start to search. They will start to say, is there anybody who knows, for instance, who can give me some indications how to deal with my emotions? We talk about emotional intelligence, but we have absolutely zero classes about how to handle and how to develop emotionally. We talk about the importance of it. We talk about relationships, but we have zero classes about teaching how to relate to people, relationships. In Tantra, you learn entire chapters about human relationships, of all the kinds of, the essence, the principles of how to relate, which means they are applicable anywhere, in any culture, for everybody as such. So that's why the necessity is there, is growing immensely, and then the existence of the teachings is just waiting to be absorbed into the into the vacuum there, and then it will be, I'm sure, it will be massive. I've seen it in a small scale in 1989 because the communist regime in the East Europe. You don't know because you were you were not around.
No, I was around, but in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, you were a little. You were
6-year-old.
Yeah, you were around, but you haven't seen it from distance. You saw it on the media, which is a very distorted. But the communist regime, they practically eliminated almost any form of spirituality as such. And then in 1989, on that vacuum, these teachings spread immediately. Why? Not because, I mean, I saw a poster, a black and white, A5, a slip of paper, the really like super simple and so on, but it was enough. In the class Greek started in early January 1990, there were 3,000 people. Such class doesn't exist, like only in an idyllic world. And what was that? I mean, you cannot speak about a campaign because it was just few weeks ago we were in full communism there. It was like just few weeks later. There's no way. And it was forbidden, by the way. So there was no preparation. And yet the necessity made it so popular. I'm quite sure we are heading towards a planetary scale 1989. Or 1789 for that matter, hopefully a little wiser and not dominated by the same forces. But anyway, that's how I see it. And the necessity will bring in these teachings. All we need to do is to be there to spread the dust of gold of these teachings.
So the hopeful message is, let's hope for 1989 and not to Orwell's 1983. So we can...
84.
84, sorry.
No, 83 was before that.
And then, talking about the fact that somehow the thirst of people then will bring it so that they will look for it themselves. A bit more of a personal question. As an author of a weekly course, so every week you need to write a course. That always fascinated me. What guides you in... What's the next chapter? How to compose this? How to bring all those notions together? Sometimes teaching the lessons that you composed, I mean, there are references from 10 different books. There is a variety of things. Do you work in the same way when you write those courses, those lessons? Do you aim to, or you feel the thirst of the people and you try to answer them? Otherwise, you feel their needs and you are kind of providing a course, or is it coming in a different way? It's fascinating of the... How does it come to be?
It's coming in a combination. You see, very often we are used to, with this demand and request system that is the marketing, so to speak, today. And we think in these terms, but education, and especially spiritual education, in these terms of spiritual science, it works the other way around. You connect to the higher necessity, not to what people in their, let's say, normal way would demand. Because it's exactly like you are asking a child, what do you want? Candies. What else do you want? Candies. And what else? Candies. So that's it. And you make a candy shop and you make all the kids in the neighborhood happy. But knowing that they are kids, then you don't even ask them. Not that you don't need to ask. Again, you ask them slightly. Okay, so candies, what kind of candies do you like? I like this kind. Okay, I give you one candy and you have it together with the broccoli and salad and whatever is healthy for your development. So, but how do you know that? You know that from your own experience and the books, because you mentioned, they are references on books. These books would mean nothing if I didn't have, and I don't have a constant spiritual practice together with the guidance from my teacher that even today is guiding me to find those chapters, so to speak. And then, of course, it's exactly like you try to take a three-dimensional object, which is multidimensional here, but for the sake of understanding, imagine an apple or an object, three-dimensional, but you try to describe it in 2 dimensions. And then what you do is you make sections in it, you project it from this side, 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 section 1, section 2, section 3, diagonal section, and so on. So practically in time, you build the experience of a 3-dimensional object, which otherwise cannot be explained. It's exactly what happens since we have linear transmission, because we have a weekly course, incremental transmission. Then you have to have such a section through this complex body of understanding, which is practically describing our consciousness, but then sliced in such a way that when you pack it together, it will result into the apple, analogically. So it's a reverse engineer of the creation of the apple. So, but of course, for that even to happen, it is very important to discover the inner apple, so to speak, to have the capacity to experience it deep inside from all possible angles simultaneously. Once you have that, then you can begin the process of reverse engineer. How did you get there? And that's a course. That's briefly how.
A question is for the last 11 years of
yes.
you're teaching.
Good. I think we are running out of the frame of this talk, Foca, but it will be a series again. we will do more. If you want to join me I'm planning to have more talks about Tantra, since it is one of my life works and passions, and I want to share with everyone who is interested at least to get the taste of it a little bit. So you're welcome to join me again in this journey. What would you say as a conclusion of our talk today?
Well, I will take somehow the conclusion of the cake and the circle. So the conclusion of the cake, from a tantric perspective as you describe it, the slice makes sense only when it is part of something bigger. And this is so important in Tantra, as you said, as the unifying factor. The whole library makes sense because there is a unifying factor there. And the way we walk on this path is understanding first where we are in the circle, understanding that it is a circle, and then we have the wise way of conduct. We understand the path of life, and then we can integrate spirituality in those dark time, the decadence time, the complex time, the crisis, however we want to call it. We have the right both roadmap and compass to guide us on this path. So that was my take from this fascinating hour.
Thank you. It's a very beautiful, it will answer lots of people's questions that we get. What is Tantra? Why Tantra?
The questions I asked is, many of my students asked me the question, and I said, I need to ask this to Advaitananda, because he can give an answer that will benefit many people on the path.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me here.
I'm very happy to have you, and it's very pleasant to hear your questions again. I missed your questions in the classes, but I guess this is the cycle of life. We
meet again.
We meet again in the different contexts. So thank you also, all of you, for following all this talk. Please don't hesitate to write and to comment below. And I'll see you in next podcast also on the topic of Tantra. And of course, don't forget that being alive is a continuous transformation. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Continuous Transformation Podcast. For more episodes, articles, and events, visit advaitananda.com.